I crouched low, stirring the pot over the fire. The flames crackled, sending sparks flying into the cool evening air. The smell of wild onions and roots filled my nostrils. My stomach growled. I had a small catch today, but it wasn't enough. The sun was setting and the shadows were getting longer. I glanced around, looking for my trusty hatchet. It lay on the ground beside me, its blade gleaming in the fading light. I picked it up, feeling the weight in my hand. I needed to gather more wood for the night. A cold wind began to blow, rustling the leaves above me. As I walked into the thicket, I could feel the crunch of twigs under my feet. I reached for a thick branch to chop. My heart raced a bit as I remembered how easy it was to get turned around in these woods. The trees stood tall and close together, like a maze with no end. I focused on my task. I swung the hatchet, feeling its bite against the wood. After a few swings, I heard something. A rustling noise came from behind me. I turned quickly, gripping my hatchet tightly. My heart pounded, just a squirrel darting up a tree. I sighed, feeling silly. But the sound was a good reminder. In these woods, you need to stay alert. With an armful of branches, I headed back to my campsite. The fire crackled louder now, and I added a few more sticks to keep it going. I sat down on a log, running my hand through my hair, feeling the sweat on my forehead. The fire was warm against the chill creeping into the night. I stirred the pot again, still not feeling satisfied. I pulled out some flint from my pack. A spark could help me get a few tiny pieces of dry bark going. I struck it hard, focusing on having the spark land just right. The first few tries failed. My fingers were getting sore, but I didn't give up. Finally, a tiny flame flickered to life. I quickly added some dry grass, and soon I had a small, dancing fire next to my cooking pot. With the fire crackling, I took a moment to breathe. I looked around my camp. The makeshift shelter was simple, a few branches leaned astile against a fallen tree. The roof was covered with thick leaves. It felt sturdy, but I knew it needed reinforcement. I'd work on it later. I pulled out some of my catch. A small fish lay in the bottom of my pack. I had learned to clean and cook it quickly. With careful movements, I set it on a flat rock by the fire. The heat had my mouth watering. As I cooked, I listened to the sounds of the forest. The wind whispered through the trees. I heard the occasional hoot of an owl nearby. It reminded me how far I was from home. My thoughts drifted for a moment, but the need to eat brought me back. I focused on the fish, turning it to ensure it cooked evenly. Once it was done, I took it off the rock and tore a piece with my hands. The flaky meat tasted rich and savory. I chewed slowly, enjoying each bite. Food was so important out here. Without it, I wouldn't last long. After I finished eating, I weighed my next move. I needed a better place to sleep. The shelter was decent, but I could improve it. I stood and turned my attention to the surrounding trees. I spotted some thick, low branches nearby. I grabbed my hatchet and walked over. I could use them to create more walls for my shelter. As I began to chop, sweat dripped down my face. Each stroke of the hatchet cracked through the wood with satisfying force. I pulled down several branches. Periodically, I paused to listen to the woods. Everything felt alive. I caught sight of a deer bounding through the thicket. It vanished in the underbrush, but it reminded me of the wildness around me. It was both exciting and a little scary. With branches piled up, I started building. I leaned them against the existing shelter, making sure they were sturdy. With each branch, my shelter felt stronger. It was more than just a place to sleep. It felt secure against the chill of the night. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows. I worked faster, feeling the urgency. As the stars began to peek through, I finished the walls. I stood back, admiring my work. It wasn't perfect, but it felt good. My little fort was ready for whatever the night had in store. With night upon me, I crawled inside the shelter. I could still hear the forest living outside. I laid on the ground, covered with a layer of leafy branches for warmth. My heart felt calm as I watched the firelight flicker through the entrance. Suddenly, a noise startled me. It was a growl. I held my breath. Was it the wind playing tricks or something more? The growl came again, closer this time. I strained to hear. In the dark, I couldn't see anything, but my heart began to race. I reached for my hatchet, clutching it tightly. The sound was nearby, low and rumbling. I thought about what to do. Should I make noise? Should I stay silent? The growl turned into another sound, a rustle. I decided to stay quiet. The last thing I wanted was to attract attention. I listened closely. Finally, the sound receded. I let out the breath I was holding. Whatever it was, it seemed to move away. I pulled the leafy cover tighter around me, my mind racing. The night passed slowly. I couldn't sleep, worried about what else might wander by. Each sound seemed magnified in the darkness. But finally, the horizon began to glow. The sun rose, painting the sky orange and pink. The forest looked alive again as the light filtered through the trees. I crawled out of my shelter, feeling stiff but alive. The air was crisp and a feeling of safety wrapped around me. I looked at my makeshift home. It had protected me through the night. I noticed my fire had dwindled to glowing embers. I added some dry wood and soon it blazed again. I needed breakfast. With my fishing line at the ready, I decided to head to the river nearby. The thought of fresh fish fueled my motivation. Walking through the woods, I felt the earth beneath my feet. Each step reminded me of my situation, the thrill of being lost mixed with the joy of finding this new shelter. On reaching the river, the water sparkled in the sunlight. I carefully set up my line and waited. The chirping of birds surrounded me. I felt connected to everything around me. After some time, I got a bite. My heart raced as I pulled in a small trout. I couldn't help but smile. I quickly cleaned and cooked it over a small campfire by the river. It felt good to be back in the rhythm of survival. I took a moment to enjoy my meal, savoring every bite. Being lost seemed less daunting when I had food in my belly and warmth in my heart. As I finished eating, I thought of my shelter again. It had saved me last night, but I wanted to expand it. I decided to gather more materials and make it a true base for my adventure. The day passed in a flurry of activity. Collecting branches, weaving in grasses, and reinforcing the roof kept me busy. My hands were rough and sore, but each moment spent building filled me with satisfaction. As evening approached, I stepped back and admired what I had created. The shelter looked strong, almost inviting. It felt like home now, a place where I could rest and recharge. That night, I curled up inside, feeling secure. I listened to the familiar sounds of the forest. The owls hooted and frogs croaked near the river. I was lost, but I had found a part of myself here. Falling asleep, I couldn't help but feel gratitude. I had survived another day in the wild, and my shelter was a testament to that. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I was ready to face them. Every sunrise marked a new beginning, and I was ready to embrace it all. I woke up to a strange sound, crackling. Not the sound of my fire or leaves rustling in the wind, but something closer. The kind of sound that sends a chill down your spine. I opened my eyes and peered out from my makeshift shelter, heart racing. There it was, a shadow in the dim light lurking just outside the brush. I had been lost for 3 days, deep in these woods, and the isolation was both exhilarating and terrifying. I had learned to depend on my instincts and the skills I thought I possessed. But right now, those skills felt inadequate. I had stumbled into the wild, far from any path I knew, seeking adventure. Now, that adventure felt dangerously close to turning into a nightmare. The flickering light of my fire cast eerie shadows around the campsite. I glanced back at my gear, a simple tarp held up by branches, some rope I had made from twisted fibers, and my trusty hatchet. It looked flimsy next to the towering trees that surrounded me. Were those the sounds of a predator? I'll admit my mind raced back to the survival shows I'd watched. The what-ifs spiraled through my head. What if I was being hunted? What if my cozy two-man campsite became a dangerous trap? I took a deep breath, trying to regain my focus. I reached for my hatchet, steadying my shaking hands. Whatever was lurking out there, I couldn't let fear consume me. So I snuck out of my shelter and crept toward the sound. Each step was calculated, careful, the soft earth muffling my footfalls. As I peered through the underbrush, what emerged from the shadows shocked me. It was just a deer, its big brown eyes wide, staring at me with a mix of curiosity and caution. My heart slowed just a little. That was a reminder of the peace that could exist in this wild, a stark juxtaposition to my inner turmoil. Then it struck me. If I was going to survive, I needed to move fast. I couldn't stay in one place too long. The thought of wandering deeper into the woods made my gut twist again. But what other choice did I have? As I stood there, my mind raced with possibilities. I turned and sprinted back to my camp. I had to find a better shelter, something more substantial. Even my heart couldn't handle the stress of wondering if a predator was prowling nearby. I grabbed my gear and set off toward the river I had seen on my map. It would lead me somewhere, I figured. Anywhere but here. As I moved, the trees closed in around me, their branches intertwined like fingers gripping the sky. The air was heavy with the scent of moss and wet earth. I navigated through thickets and fallen logs, pushing myself to maintain speed. Hours passed. The sun filtered through the canopy above, but I had no concept of time, only fatigue. I paused at a small clearing, catching my breath. Moss blanketed the ground, and small ferns reached up like welcoming arms. The beauty of nature was overwhelming, yet I couldn't afford to lose focus. Then I spotted something, a cove, a natural bend in the river with high, banked earth on both sides. It seemed perfect, a potential spot for a strong shelter. The water rippled gently, and I moved closer, feeling the cool breeze across my face. My excitement simmered as I surveyed the area. This was it. I could create a shelter here and stay safe. I envisioned walls, a solid roof, a fire to keep me warm. With renewed determination, I set to work, clearing away brush and gathering fallen branches. I picked up a fallen log that would serve as a foundation. Using my hatchet, I began chopping smaller branches to create walls. The rhythmic sound of metal on wood became a calming mantra. Each strike brought a sense of progress, bolstering my confidence. I was building something real, something that could protect me. I layered thick leaves and smaller logs, crafting walls that would deflect wind and keep the rain at bay. After a few hours, I stood back and admired my handiwork. It was rough but sturdy enough to keep me out of sight and out of the elements. I was no longer just a lost wanderer. I was on my way to becoming a survivor. As evening approached, I gathered more dry wood and began to lay down my fire pit closer to the entrance of the shelter. I wanted to feel that warmth and light as night descended, but my heart hammered nervously with the setting sun. The deepening shadows felt alive, the night waiting to break free. I lit the fire with a few sparks from my flint and couldn't help but smile as the flames danced higher. The warmth enveloped me, pushing away the cold thoughts that had crept in. But as darkness settled in, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every rustle seemed multiplied, echoing through that quietness. Suddenly, I heard that sound again, the low growl. It came from the woods, my entire being tensed. I peered into the shadows, searching for movement. But all I could see were those trees, dark and imposing. The fire flickered as I sat on a stump, my hatchet gripped tightly in my hands. I felt the heat from the flames, but the fear wrapped itself around me like a heavy blanket. I was lost, completely alone with no one to turn to. Time slipped by and the growl became a distant memory. I forced myself to eat a small piece of jerky I had brought along, but it felt like chewing on rubber. My mind wandered back to home. I thought of the warm meals, the laughter around the dinner table, the comfort of safety. I inhaled deeply, grounding myself in this moment. Night crept on and I transitioned into a fitful sleep, waking often to the eerie sounds of the forest. I dreamt of home and hot meals, only to be jostled awake by the hooting of owls above. Dawn finally broke and I emerged from my shelter. The air felt fresh, boosting my spirits. I made a quick breakfast from foraged nuts and berries while watching the water glisten under the morning sun. My confidence returned, but I knew I had to gather more resources. I ventured deeper into the wilderness, searching for firewood and more food. I gathered stones to create a better fire pit, crafting a small stone circle that would help me cook and keep the fire contained. That's when I noticed something strange. A large structure sprawled out in the distance. It was camouflaged among the trees, almost like a natural formation, but it wasn't. This was man-made. My heart raced. Could this be someone's camping ground, or a shelter that had been forgotten? Curiosity propelled me forward. I carefully stepped through the underbrush, approaching the mysterious form. As I got closer, my jaw dropped in awe. Massive logs formed walls, creating a large shelter that could fit 5 or 6 people comfortably. The roof was woven with thick branches, leaving small spaces for sunlight to peek through. It was incredible, a place that could be my home for weeks if I could make it work. I quickly ducked inside. The first thing I felt was the warmth. It was dry and inviting, a stark contrast to my last few days. This could be my sanctuary. The walls were strong and I could see clear evidence that others had stayed here before, remnants of a fire pit, leftover gear, even some fishing nets hung from the rafters. I took a minute to explore, checking every nook and cranny. Then I began to think. I could use what was here to make my life easier. The thought sparked new energy within me. After rummaging through the shelter, I found fishing gear and a couple of large, flat stones that could serve as cooking implements. I gathered my supplies and rushed back to the river, heart pounding with excitement. Once back at the riverbank, I set up the nets. It felt surreal, a kind of teamwork between man and nature. I grinned while I waited, soaking in the sunlight and listening to the bubbling water. After a while, I felt a tug on the net. I pulled it up, revealing a sizable trout flopping about. My heart surged with joy. This meal would nourish me both physically and mentally. I quickly cleaned the fish at the water's edge and built a fire with the stones I had collected, preparing to cook my catch right there under the trees. The aroma of the fish filled the air, a scent I had almost forgotten amidst my restless nights. I couldn't remember the last time I felt this satisfied, this alive. I took a moment to simply enjoy my surroundings, the chirping of birds, the gentle rustle of leaves in the wind, the warmth of the sun on my back. As I sat savoring my meal, I reflected on my journey. I had started lost and frightened. Now I felt a sense of pride in my survival and my adaptability. Each challenge pushed me, each night was a test, but here I was, claiming my place in the wilderness. As evening approached, I wandered back to the shelter I had discovered. The internal spaces felt comforting, a home amidst the chaos. I added some stones around the fire pit, putting my newfound resources to good use, making it shine bright in the gathering darkness. The night felt less threatening now. As I lay on the ground, listening to the crackling fire, I felt at peace. I was no longer lost, no longer a wanderer. I had built a life, however temporary, in this wild and beautiful place. Someday I would leave this wilderness behind and the memories would remain. But for now, I had discovered something deeper: strength, resilience, and the simple joy that comes from finding your way home even when you've been utterly lost. I jolted awake to the sharp snap of a twig nearby. Instinct kicked in and I froze, heart pounding. Was it a bear? A wolf? I had no idea what I was facing, but I could feel adrenaline coursing through my veins like lightning. My eyes darted around the dimly lit shelter formed by branches and leaves, a makeshift home I had thrown together in a hurry. 3 days ago, I was just hiking along a familiar trail, breathing in the fresh air and enjoying the beauty of the world. But somewhere along the path, I took a wrong turn. A wrong turn that led to sudden disorientation and an unexpected plunge into the depths of this untamed wilderness. I carefully unzipped the flap of my shelter, peeking out to see what was making that noise. The forest was alive with sounds: rustling leaves, distant bird calls, the soft trickle of a nearby stream. But there, just out of sight, I could sense something stirring. My muscles tensed and every instinct told me to stay quiet. I reached for my hatchet, the only tool I had to defend or build. It felt heavy in my palm. Suddenly, a flash of movement caught my eye. I leaned forward, breath caught in my throat. Then I saw it, a deer, graceful and beautiful, darting into the trees. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Fear turned to relief, but immediately reality set back in. I was still alone, lost in this vast expanse of green, devoid of any true shelter or safety. The memory of the warm sun shining down on familiar trails made my heart ache. I had to get out of here. I couldn't linger in fear, and I couldn't let a beast of the night hunt me. With renewed determination, I crawled out of my haphazard shelter, my gaze scanning the dense forest floor. I needed somewhere more secure. I remembered seeing a river on my map before I lost my bearings. Water would lead me to safety, or at least a sense of direction. The thought filled me with energy as I started moving. The air was crisp and cool against my face, and every step felt fragile as I navigated through underbrush. Branches snagged at my clothes and roots tried to trip me, but I pushed forward. My heart raced, fueled by urgency. The rustle of leaves and the distant sound of water spurred me on. I stumbled upon a small clearing, the sun painting the ground with patches of light. A wave of hope washed over me. I scanned the area for any sign of the river, and then I saw it glistening through the trees. I picked up my pace, adrenaline igniting my resolve. As I moved closer, the sound of the flowing water grew louder. Approaching the riverbank, I couldn't help but feel transformed. The sight of that bubbling stream reminded me of life's simplest pleasures. I knelt down, cupping the cool water in my hands and taking a long drink. It was refreshing, invigorating, but the urgency still lay heavy on my mind. I needed shelter and fast. The sun was dipping low, and while beautiful, it signaled danger. Nightfall would bring its own threats, and I had no intentions of facing that vulnerability again. I scanned the edge of the river and spotted a cluster of large, sturdy trees, a perfect spot for a shelter. The trunks were thick and tall, their branches creating a natural canopy against the sky. Inspiration surged within me. I could build something solid, something that would keep me safe. But time was ticking. I grabbed fallen branches and logs, feeling the weight of each piece as I began constructing a frame. My hatchet swung down, cutting through the wood with determination. Sweat beaded on my forehead, and the physical activity turbocharged my focus. I felt grounded, alive in the work, each swing a reminder of my will to survive. As I built, I took a moment to survey my surroundings. The river gurgled beside me, birds flitted among the branches, and life thrived all around. Even in the chaos of my mind, I could feel a strange comfort in the wilderness. I wasn't just lost, I was part of this chaotic ecosystem. Every so often, I'd stop and listen. The sounds of nature blended like a soothing melody. It was a stark contrast to the noise of everyday life back home. Here I was raw and unfiltered, stripped of the distractions that cluttered my mind. With the frame in place, I began layering branches and leaves, creating walls that would keep me secure. I crouched down, feeling the earth beneath me, aware of the power and strength nature held. Time slipped away as I worked, losing myself in the creation of my new shelter. Hours passed. I built the walls higher, weaving in smaller branches for strength. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I finished the last touches on the roof, a thick layer of leaves to keep me dry. I stepped back to admire my handiwork, exhaustion washing over me. This structure felt solid. It was a fortress against the wilderness. Darkness pooled around me and the forest transformed. Shadows grew deeper and the first stars began to twinkle above. I gathered some dry wood and tucked it neatly inside my new home. The fire pit became my next priority. I quickly dug a shallow hole with my hatchet and formed a circle of stones around it. As the fire crackled to life, warmth radiated through the chilly night. I watched the flames flicker, casting dancing light on the walls of my shelter. In that moment, I felt like a conqueror and architect of my own safety. I was alive, functioning on instincts, and thriving despite the fear that had threatened to take over just hours before. As I sat by the fire, my mind began to calm. I reached for a few foraged nuts and seeds in my bag, nibbling carefully, grateful for every morsel. I needed to rest, but the sounds of the dark kept my nerves rattling. The hoots of owls echoed around me, and the rustle of leaves felt larger than life in the quiet of the night. I thought of home, of the sounds of laughter and chatter, the peacefulness of a familiar routine. The ache of nostalgia tugged at me, but a new understanding emerged. I was forging a connection with this wild world. Each sound, each shadow became part of me now. I positioned myself deeper inside the shelter, the warm glow of the fire inviting me to relax. But the night was relentless. Every crack sounded like a potential threat, although I was armed with my hatchet and determination. I gritted my teeth, keeping my ears open and my heart calm. As sleep threatened to claim me, I resolved to stay alert. I envisioned the structure I had built as a protective cocoon. With each breath, I immersed myself in the solitude, the quietude of the wilderness slowly wrapping around me. I breathed deeply and finally closed my eyes, letting the warmth of the fire lure me into a restless sleep. When morning broke, I awoke to the chirping of birds and the pale light filtering through my leafy roof. Rubbing the sleep from my eyes, I crawled out into the new day, still marveling at the incredible shelter I had created. I felt oddly proud, and that pride pushed away remnants of fear. I needed a plan. I had to gather more food. I ventured back to the river, refreshed by the cool water and the warm sun shining down. This time, I brought my hatchet along. I was ready to put it to work, but I also knew I had to be careful. It didn't take long to revisit feelings of being lost. As I cast my line into the river, I felt the frustration that comes when you're at the mercy of nature. Hours passed with little success. My stomach began to growl, and I chased away the anxiety creeping back in. Just then, a plop in the water startled me. I turned my head, and lo and behold, there it was, a fish, its scales glistening. I seized the moment, adrenaline surging as I pulled in my fishing line. The small fish flopped violently, but I caught it securely. Victory surged through my veins as I returned to the campfire, ready to feast. Cooking the fish over the fire felt like a ritual. I cleaned it with the precision I had learned, building my confidence with each step. The scent soon filled the air, and while I waited, my eyes wandered to the forest surrounding my shelter. It was astounding. The world was so alive. Birds flitted from branch to branch, and the rustle of leaves created a symphony that played with the flames. I became grounded in the present moment, savoring life's simplest pleasures. Finally, the fish was ready, and I sat down, gnawing on the flaky meat, each bite rich and fulfilling. Satisfaction washed over me. I was no longer just surviving, I was living. The rest of the day was a blur of thoughts and actions, finding more food, expanding my fire pit, reinforcing my shelter. I had no blueprint, only instinct and the knowledge I'd picked up from books and videos. My brain chugged along like a machine, finding solutions to problems I never thought I would face. That night, as darkness settled in again, I felt less anxious. I felt stronger. My shelter stood tall, a monument to my perseverance and adaptability. I closed my eyes with gratitude, realizing how far I had come in just a few short days. But the next morning was a shock. The air felt different, heavy, thick. I stepped outside my shelter to see the sky smothered with dark clouds. Rain threatened on the horizon, and a sense of urgency sparked within me. Time was of the essence. Hurrying, I collected more branches for reinforcements. I layered more leaves and built a better roof. The wind picked up, and with it came the first splashes of rain. My heart raced. I couldn't let my shelter fail me now. As the rain began to pour, I dove inside my fortified structure just in time. The sound of raindrops hitting leaves above created a rhythmic pattern, a soothing reminder that I had built something resilient. I watched as the rain fell in sheets, saturating the forest, flooding the ground around my campsite. I felt a mix of dread and relief. Nature had its own rhythm, and I was learning to adapt to it. The storm raged, the wind howled, but my shelter held strong. I closed my eyes again, feeling blessed for the safety I had created. When the storm finally passed, I emerged from my refuge. The world looked transformed, washed clean and vibrant. Sunlight broke through the clouds, washing over everything in golden light. I stepped out into the fresh air, feeling invigorated. All those fears I had at the beginning, the isolation, they seemed distant now. I realized something profound. Sometimes getting lost is the first step toward discovering not just a new place, but a new part of yourself. Days turned into a week, and the wilderness became a part of who I was. I walked, I built, I learned how to forage, and I understood how to be still. I found comfort in the chaos and the silence. Eventually, I made plans to leave. The forest had taught me lessons about resilience and courage. I had become adept at surviving, but I couldn't stay forever. As I stood at the edge of my shelter one last time, I felt powerful. I may have been lost once, but now I was full of strength and clarity. I turned to face the way I came, heart full of the wild beauty around me. I took a deep breath, thanked the forest, and stepped forward with purpose, ready to embrace whatever was next. I awoke to silence, a heavy blanket of stillness that felt wrong. My eyes fluttered open, and the sunlight filtering through the trees cast eerie shadows inside my makeshift shelter. The scent of damp earth hung in the air, but something was off. I sat up abruptly, heart racing, realizing I was alone, truly alone. 3 days earlier, I was hiking with friends, sharing laughter and stories along a well-traveled trail. That was before I decided to venture off into the thickets, chasing after the promise of a hidden waterfall. Driven by curiosity and a spirit of adventure, I ignored the warning signs and lost my way. Now here I was in an endless sea of trees. Fear washed over me like a cold wave, threatening to pull me under. I took a deep breath, steadying my shaky hands. I needed to gather myself. I couldn't let panic take over. Instead, I focused on my surroundings. My shelter, a crude arrangement of branches and leaves, felt fragile. But it was more than that. It was my only shield against the wild. As I peered out into the dense foliage, something rustled nearby. My heart thudded in my chest. Was it a deer? A bear? I grabbed my hatchet, a tool that felt both comforting and inadequate in this vast wilderness. My mind raced. The stories I'd heard about getting lost in the woods and the horrors that could ensue echoed in my thoughts. But I couldn't dwell on fear. I had to focus and make a plan. I crept cautiously out of my shelter, gripping the hatchet tightly. The forest around me was a mix of beauty and danger, moss-covered trunks, vibrant ferns. Each rustle seemed magnified, every shadow loomed larger than life. I needed water. That was crucial. I remembered the stream I had crossed. If I could make my way back to it, maybe I could spot my original trail. I stumbled through the undergrowth, keeping my eyes alert for any signs, anything familiar. Branches snapped underfoot, each crunch echoing in the stillness. I was hyper-aware of my surroundings, every sound sending jolts through my already frayed nerves. A small clearing appeared ahead, sunlight spilling through the trees like golden honey. My heart raced with hope. I stepped into the open, and there it was, the stream, glistening like a ribbon of life through the forest floor. Relief flooded over me. I knelt by the water, cupping my hands and drinking deeply. The coolness rejuvenated me. I looked around, spotting familiar landmarks, a large rock, a particular tree. I was close to where I had lost the trail, but just as quickly, that wave of hope began to ebb away. I had no friends nearby, no map, no real sense of direction. I felt vulnerable and small in this majestic wilderness, battling against forces bigger than myself. As I rose, determination sparked within me. I couldn't remain helpless. I needed to find shelter, something more than what I had thrown together. Moving along the stream, I spotted an old trail, overgrown and barely visible. I followed it with urgency, hoping it might lead me to civilization. As I walked, my mind turned to survival. I had to think clearly. I'd watched countless survival shows, I'd read books. Now it was time to put all that knowledge to the test. Hours passed, the sun slowly shifting overhead. I ventured deeper into the woods when I noticed something unusual, a massive structure peeking through the trees. Intrigue pulled me forward. Could it be? I felt excitement tug at my heart. The closer I got, the more it emerged from the shadows. A colossal bushcraft shelter stood like a guardian of the forest. It was an incredible sight, an intricate creation made from logs, branches, and natural materials. The roof was sturdy, woven tightly with thick vines and leaves. This was a haven, a place where I could protect myself from the wild. I stepped closer, reverently touching the smooth bark of the logs. The craftsmanship was impressive, an unmistakable testament to the skill of whoever built it. A surge of hope filled me. This could be my sanctuary. As I explored the interior, I felt a rush of emotions. It was dry, spacious, and comforting. The sunlight broke through the gaps in the roof, creating a warm, inviting glow. I could almost smell the safety lingering here. I knew I needed to make this place my own. I set to work immediately, gathering branches and leaves to reinforce the walls and door. I dug a pit for a fire outside the entrance, carefully arranging stones around it. A fire would provide warmth, light, and the ability to cook. With every task, I felt more connected to this space. It was as if the forest embraced me in its wild arms. While I worked, my mind whirled with the possibilities. I remembered watching videos about foraging and hunting. I needed to gather food. I had no intention of running out of supplies, but I had to be cautious of the creatures that roamed at night. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, I ventured back toward the stream to forage. I searched for wild herbs or edible plants to keep my energy up. With some luck, I gathered a handful of berry sweet and tart, tucking them into my pocket for later. But I knew I needed protein. That thought steered me further into the heart of the forest. Hours seemed to stretch as I walked, and just when I thought I'd have to turn back, I spotted movement in the underbrush. My heart raced as I approached slowly. There it was, a small rabbit nibbling on some grass, oblivious to my presence. I crouched down, my breath shallow. In that moment, my instincts kicked in. I remembered everything I had ever learned about survival. I pulled a thick vine I had gathered and fashioned a simple snare. Holding my breath, I set it with careful precision. If I could catch this rabbit, it might sustain me for days. I waited, patience wrestling with anxiety. Minutes turned into an eternity, but then I felt a tug on the vine. The rabbit was caught. Adrenaline surged through me as I sprang into action, grasping the creature gently but firmly. I felt a mix of triumph and gratitude for this gift of nature. I whispered a quick thanks, honoring the life that would sustain mine. With a triumphant smile, I made my way back to my shelter, excitement bubbling beneath the surface. As I cooked over the fire, the aroma filled the air, a rich, savory scent that made my stomach growl in appreciation. Eating that first bite felt like a victory in itself. It was more than food, it was survival. That night, as I sat by the fire, I gazed at the stars shining bright above me. Their brilliance stole my breath. I couldn't help but reflect on the raw beauty around me. The wilderness was harsh, yet I felt a sense of peace. I was alive. I was in control, but fear lurked in the shadows, a constant reminder of my vulnerability. As night deepened, the sounds shifted, the screeches of owls, the rustling of leaves, the distant howls of coyotes. Each sound was a stark reminder that I was not alone in this wild world. Darkness seemed alive, waiting for its moment. I nestled deeper into my shelter, the sturdy walls surrounding me a reassuring embrace. With the comforting crackle of the fire beside me, I drifted into a restless sleep, lulled by the symphony of the night. But the next morning held a new fear. As I emerged from my shelter, the world was transformed by a thick fog hanging in the air. Visibility shrank to mere feet, a disorienting blanket that left me feeling vulnerable. I stepped out cautiously, the ground damp beneath my feet. The air was thick, the coolness wrapping around me like a shroud. I decided to scout the area, hoping to find the path back to where I began. With each step, I fought against the creeping dread overwhelming me. If I lost my way again, I had to stay focused. I followed the stream, reminding myself to breathe. After all, I had a shelter waiting for me, a refuge I had built with my own hands. I reminded myself of every skill I had learned and practiced. Each moment spent in the woods had taught me something new: resilience, patience, how to trust my instincts. But the fog thickened, swallowing the surrounding trees, distorting sounds, making me doubt everything. I felt small, lost all over again. Panic clenched at my chest as branches snagged at my clothes. I could barely hear the gentle gurgle of the stream, and I missed the solace it once offered. Suddenly, a rustle came from nearby, a sharp noise slicing through the fog. Was it an animal? My heart raced faster. I gripped my hatchet, muscles tensed, ready to face the unknown. But then, just as quickly, the sound faded away. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to remember who I was now, the person who forged a new life in these woods. The confidence I had built over the days pushed me to push forward. I continued along the stream, hoping to retrace my steps. Then through the haze, I spotted it again, the massive Bushcraft shelter. Relief washed over me. I was back. As I stepped inside, the familiar scent of wood and earth grounded me. My heart settled as I submerged myself in gratitude for this space. I needed to shore up my supplies. I focused on gathering more sticks, reinforcing my shelter against the unpredictable weather. As I worked, I felt renewed vigor surge through me. I was determined to make this safe haven my own. With each branch I tied, I felt a sense of empowerment. I was no longer the lost hiker. I had become a part of this wilderness. Evening approached, and I meticulously filled the fire pit with dry wood. As the flames flickered to life, warmth enveloped me. The night unfolded like a familiar story. The distant calls of the woods echoing around me felt harmonious now. I sat by the fire, sipping from a cup of foraged berries and nuts. The coolness of the night was no longer frightening. It was home. Days passed with an easy rhythm. I gathered food, worked on my shelter, and observed the beauty around me. I learned the ways of the forest, distinguishing the calls of birds and tracking footprints in the mud. But behind that peaceful existence, a part of me held onto the fear of being lost. Each time I ventured to explore deeper, a whisper of doubt lingered. But that fear began to change. It became a motivator, a drive to learn more about my surroundings, to grow even stronger. As I worked, I became attuned to the forest. I learned to listen to its stories, the rustling leaves, the shifting shadows, the chorus of nature that guided me. One fateful day, I decided to test my skills further. I chose to head away from the stream, venturing toward the hills. My heart raced in excitement. I felt liberated, ready to forge new paths as if inviting the unknown. I packed my hatchet, a small bundle of food, and set off with determination. The climb grew steeper, and the forest transformed around me into something lush and vibrant. I felt the sun warming my back, energizing me with each step. As the trees briefly parted, a breathtaking view unfolded before my eyes, a sweeping vista of green hills rolling into the horizon. In that moment, I felt invincible. I had journeyed from being lost to discovering a part of myself I didn't even know existed. I realized the wilderness had not just shaped me, it had healed me. But then something caught my eye a flash in the distance. I squinted against the light, noticing a figure moving among the trees. My heart raced. Was it a fellow hiker? I felt a blend of excitement and fear. What if it was just my imagination? I strained to see, pulse quickening. I approached slowly, trying to stay hidden. As I drew closer, I saw someone, a real live human. They were a hiker hauling a backpack and scanning the area. Relief washed over me. I called out, breaking the spell of solitude. The hiker turned, startled. As I got closer, surprise flickered in their eyes. They asked, a hint of disbelief in their tone. We exchanged stories as the sun began to dip behind the hills. I shared my experience, the incredible shelter, the lessons learned. They listened wide-eyed as I described how the wilderness had transformed my perspective on life. The moment felt electric. We had both navigated the wild, forging our own stories, yet it was a reminder that we are never truly alone. I felt gratitude wash over me, the trials and triumphs woven into every heartbeat. As the stars emerged, I felt something profound. The wilderness had given me strength, resilience, and connection. I was no longer just a lost wanderer. I was a survivor, an adventurer, a true part of nature's tapestry. That night, as we set up camp together under the sprawling sky, I realized every encounter was an opportunity, each moment in the wild a chance to rediscover life. I had been lost, yes, but I had built a home, a new beginning, and a profound appreciation for the journey ahead. My heart raced as I stared into the dense forest, the towering trees blocking out the last rays of sunlight. Just a few hours ago, I was following a well-marked trail with friends, chatting and enjoying the fresh air. Now I was alone, utterly lost, surrounded by nothing but shadows and the sounds of the wild. I hadn't meant to stray off the path. Curiosity got the better of me when I spotted a small creek trickling down the hillside. It was beautiful, and I wanted to see where it led. But in a matter of moments, I was tangled in a web of branches and thick underbrush, the cheerful laughter of my friends fading into silence. Panic bubbled beneath the surface. I took a deep breath and forced myself to focus. "Stay calm," I whispered to myself. The sun was just a golden sliver on the horizon now, and my stomach twisted with dread. I could feel nature closing in as the forest darkened. I needed to find shelter. I surveyed my surroundings, my eyes darting between the trees. There were no clear paths. Everything looked the same. I pressed onward, my feet crunching on autumn leaves and twigs. I could hear the distant rustle of animals, and my mind raced with thoughts of what might be lurking just beyond my sight. Minutes or hours past time was distorted in my anxiety. Ahead, I spotted a massive fallen tree, its trunk sprawled out over the ground like an abandoned ship. I approached it, hoping it could offer some form of shelter. The space underneath was large enough to crawl into, but it felt insufficient. There were gaps where cold air would seep through, and I imagined the critters of the night scuttling around. Determined, I moved away from the fallen tree and deeper into the woods. I had to trust my instincts. As I walked, I recalled snippets from survival shows I'd watched. Find a water source, build a shelter. Each piece of advice echoed like a mantra in my mind. Then I heard it, a sound that sent a chill down my spine. A low growl, distant but looming. My heart slammed against my ribs. Was I being followed? I turned quickly, adrenaline coursing through my veins. In a moment of instinct, I stumbled into a thicket, crouching low, trying to muffle my breath. I peered through the branches, desperate to see anything. Time slowed as I waited, the growl fading into a silence that was almost taunting. Was it a bear? A wolf? Whatever it was, I didn't want to find out. With the adrenaline still pumping, I decided to keep moving. I needed to find a shelter before darkness fell completely. The world around me felt surreal, shadows dancing in the fading light. My heart raced as I stumbled across brambles and thorns, but finally I spotted something, a glimmer of hope. Not far ahead, I noticed a cluster of trees with something unusual, a structure beautifully woven with branches and leaves, almost blending seamlessly with the surroundings. As I inched closer, my breath caught in my throat. This was no ordinary shelter. It was a mega bushcraft haven built with skill and precision. The walls were tall and sturdy, crafted from thick logs broken down with careful thought. Vines and leaves formed a protective roof overhead, the layered perch offering shelter from the elements. It felt alive, a testament to someone's hard work, and suddenly I felt a spark of optimism ignite inside me. "This could be it," I murmured, my hands trembling with excitement. I approached cautiously, still alert for any lurking dangers. I poked my head inside. The interior was spacious enough. I envisioned myself cozying up in here, feeling a sense of security wash over me. But I couldn't afford to let my guard down yet. My instincts kicked in again and I began to work. I gathered twigs and smaller branches scattered nearby, quickly fortifying the walls. Every movement felt purposeful. I remembered that I was not only a visitor but the architect of my own safety. As I built, exhaustion brushed over me, but I pushed through. The sun began its descent, casting long, dancing shadows on the ground outside. I gathered materials from the forest floor, weaving them into the structure like a puzzle. The work became meditative. Each branch added a layer of strength. Each knot tied felt like a promise to myself. As I carefully placed leaves on the roof, my heart swelled with accomplishment. I crafted a small fire pit near the entrance, circling it with stones I found lying against the earth, taking notes of what could be gathered and made into fuel. It was coming together organically, every piece fitting right where it should be. By the time I finished, the night sky turned a tapestry of deep blues and scattered stars. The fire I'd managed to start crackled energetically, illuminating my newfound sanctuary. I settled onto the earthen floor, surrounded by the scent of wood smoke and damp leaves. This felt like home, temporary but safe. As I sat by the fire, my mind churned with thoughts. I was no longer just lost. I had claimed a part of the wilderness. I had transformed fear into strength, confusion into creation, all woven together by the branches and leaves of my shelter. But still, the night was long, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every rustle outside carried weight, and I found myself glancing toward the sounds. The forest felt alive, and I knew that I was merely a visitor here. I stoked the fire, drawing warmth from the flames as I took deep breaths. I needed to relax, to trust that my shelter would protect me. When the wild chorus of the night began to settle, I curled up beside the fire, using the softest leaves to create a makeshift bed. I closed my eyes with the crackling of flames lulling me to sleep, letting the worries of the day drift into the ether. But sleep was fractured, riddled with dreams of shadows dancing just beyond my shelter. I woke often, jumping at every sound, but eventually dawn broke. The first rays of light returned, chasing away the specters of the night. I emerged into a new world washed clean by the night's rain. The air was fresh, filled with the sense of wet earth and blooming flora. But I knew I had to gather my strength. I could not linger here forever. I needed to find food and explore my surroundings. I ventured out cautiously, the vibrant colors of the forest waking before my eyes. Each step was purposeful as I crossed back to the stream, hoping to locate the wildlife I had seen from a distance. I opted to keep a low profile, knowing that food would not come easily. As I moved quietly alongside the bank, I noticed movement, a flash of brown in the brush. It darted away, but I caught just a glimpse of a rabbit. My heart raced with determination. If I could catch that rabbit, it might offer a real meal. I recalled the techniques I had learned years ago. Using the materials around me, I fashioned a simple snare, mentally grounding myself in focus and patience. I set the trap carefully, keeping low and silent. I settled a short distance away, heart racing, and waited. Minutes dragged on, stretching into an eternity. Every rustle of leaves or flutter of wings felt magnified. Just when I thought my efforts would be in vain, a slight tug on the vine jolted me to attention. The rabbit struggled momentarily before I sprang into action, adrenaline surging through my veins. With careful, swift movements, I captured the rabbit, feeling both exhilaration and gratitude. It was another victory in a series of evolving experiences in this wild landscape. I returned to my shelter, my heart pounding with adrenaline, but a sense of calm settled in as I prepared to cook. With the rabbit cooking over the fire, the aroma filled the air, a scent that sent warm waves of satisfaction rolling through me. I had worked for this reward. Slowly, I learned to appreciate each bite, grateful for the life that had entered my campfire. That night, the shadows felt less ominous. I sat near my space, feeling like I belonged to this world. I thought about how rediscovering myself had transformed my fear into strength. I reflected on how being lost had pushed me to learn and grow in ways I never expected. Days turned into a week as I settled into a rhythm within the forest. I found my footing, learning more about foraging, identifying plants, and how to use the gifts of the wild. I became skilled at building fire, crafting tools, and understanding the subtle language of nature. But still, I felt a lingering urge to explore. My curiosity pulled me to venture further than I ever had, mapping my surroundings like a newfound explorer. Each exploration was an invitation, a chance to encounter something new. One afternoon, I wandered toward the hills, the sun warm against my back. I breathed deeply, invigorated by the fresh air. In that moment, I felt more than just survival. I felt empowered. I was not merely lost. I had turned the wilderness into my school, my sanctuary. Climbing higher, I stumbled upon a breathtaking view, a kaleidoscope of valleys stretching endlessly beneath me, colors bursting forth like a painter's palette. I felt a swell of humility. The vastness was daunting yet exhilarating. I had become a part of this world, embedded in its rhythm. But even in that moment of joy, I heard a rustle below me. Heart thumping, I crouched low, scanning the area. A dark figure emerged through the foliage, a deer, serene and unaware of my presence. I watched, caught between admiration and awe. That's when it occurred to me I was part of this intricate dance of life. Just as I was about to move, I noticed something glimmering across the distance. My curiosity piqued again as I peered toward it. Not far off, I noticed what looked like remnants from a forgotten campsite, an old fire ring, some worn tools, perhaps more remnants from the people who had once occupied this land. I felt a magnetic pull, an urge to investigate further. I hopped down the rocky incline, my heart racing with anticipation. It felt like uncovering hidden treasure, remnants of lives once lived in this very wilderness. As I reached the site, I ran my fingers over the worn tools, feeling the history embedded within the earth. A sense of belonging washed over me. I was part of this cycle. It was both humbling and empowering, echoing the journey I had taken. When I moved back to my shelter, the scent of fire welcomed me. I had grown to love this place, the simplicity and serenity that the wilderness offered. I found ways to cook, gather, and reconnect with my needs. Each day felt like an adventure, and my fears transformed into fuel, igniting my desire to grow. But as night fell, I couldn't shake the feeling of solitude. As comforting as this place became, I longed for connection. I realized that my journey was about more than survival. It was intertwined with the very essence of what it is to be human. The stars twinkled above me, and I welcomed the night. It was a time for reflection, gratitude, and dreams of what lay ahead. I took a moment to express thanks for survival, for the land that embraced me, and for the journey that had transformed my spirit. Days turned into patterns, and I learned that every moment was an opportunity. I ventured often, but that cycle brought me back to the shelter, back to the stability I had created. After weeks in the woods, there came a day when I felt a shift. I was ready. My heart was still warm from the lessons learned, but instinct called me to break free. I packed my belongings and decided to follow the stream, like a river carving its own path to the sea. I started walking, breathing in the fresh air, revitalized by the journey ahead. Each step felt significant as I left behind the shelter I'd created, but as I turned to look back one last time, I felt gratitude surge through me. The wilderness had taught me resilience, patience, and the beauty of connection. I was no longer just lost in the forest. I had discovered who I was within it. As I walked forward into the unknown, I knew that wherever I ended up next, I carried the spirit of that wild landscape with me, ready to embrace new experiences, new adventures, and the endless possibilities that lay ahead. I woke up to the chill of damp air wrapping around me like a heavy blanket. Blinking my eyes open, I struggled to remember where I was. It took a moment for the memories to flood back hiking, the laughter of friends, the decision to veer off the trail to explore a hidden grove. And then confusion. I was lost. I tried to gather my thoughts, but panic gripped me. The sun had barely risen, casting faint light through the canopy overhead. I felt small and vulnerable inside my makeshift shelter, just a bundle of branches, leaves, and some moss I had cobbled together. As I listened, all I could hear was the sound of the wind sighing through the trees. With my heart racing, I crawled out of my shelter, the cool earth prickling beneath my feet. As I stepped outside, my breath caught. The forest was thick with trees towering above like ancient giants. Each shadow felt like a lurking predator, and I could almost hear my own heartbeat echoing in the silence. "Okay, focus," I whispered to myself. I scanned my surroundings, every direction looking eerily similar and tamed and wild. I attempted to retrace my steps in my mind to remember any landmarks I'd passed. But the memories were faded and jumbled like leaves stirring in the wind. The anxiety in my chest escalated. How could I have gotten so turned around so quickly? I knew I needed water, and if I could just find a stream or a river, it would guide me back to safety. I remembered crossing a small creek earlier, so I started moving in what I hoped was the right direction. With each step, the underbrush rustled around me, and I felt the weight of every sound. I paused, hearing something faint, a trickle of water, perhaps. My heart gave a hopeful leap. I shoved branches aside, pushing deeper into the woods, my feet barely making a sound against the moist earth. The sound grew louder, clearer. When I found the stream, a wave of relief washed over me. Kneeling beside it, I cupped my hands and drank deeply, the cool water invigorating me. I felt the tension start to lift as I splashed some on my face. I was still lost, but at least I had found something familiar. But I couldn't linger. I needed a proper shelter for the night. The sun was already dipping toward the horizon, and I could feel the air growing colder. Thoughts raced through my mind as I searched for a place to rest. As I continued along the stream, I glanced around, hoping for anything that might hint at safety. And then my heart skipped a beat. There it was, partially hidden behind the trees, a massive bushcraft shelter. It was a stunning sight. It looked like it had been built with purpose and skill, large logs arranged meticulously into sturdy walls. Vines and leaves woven tightly made up the roof, giving it the appearance of a fortress against whatever lay beyond. I felt a rush of gratitude wash over me. My instincts rendered hope. I approached it cautiously, stepping into the clearing for a better view. It was more than just a shelter, it was a sanctuary. I felt an overwhelming urge to make it my own. I let myself smile, imagining a warm fire crackling at my feet and the comfort of a solid roof over my head. My heart raced with adrenaline as I moved inside. The space was ample. I dropped my pack and took a moment to breathe. The smell of damp wood wrapped around me snugly. But this wasn't just a place to stay, this was an opportunity to reclaim control. I glanced around and noticed the remnants of someone else's some old firewood stacked against the wall, tools made from wood, even an old tarp. I decided to explore, soaking in all the potential that surrounded me. With my trusty hatchet in hand, I began gathering more branches, aiming to fortify my newfound fortress. Each twig I snapped off felt like an act of defiance against the fear that had gripped me earlier. I felt empowered. I was no longer just a lost hiker. I was a builder, a creator. I spent hours weaving branches together, reinforcing the walls and sealing off the gaps. I wanted this to withstand the wild, to become a fortress of my own design. It felt therapeutic, the work offering a focused escape from the anxious thoughts that had invaded my mind. As the sun lowered in the sky, hues of orange and red filled the air, and I knew I needed to create a fire. I gathered a few dry sticks, found some pine needles, and began to lay the foundation for my fire pit just outside the entrance. The crackle of the flame would keep me warm and ward off any nighttime creatures that lurked outside. Finally, as darkness settled in, I struck my flint against the rock, sparks flying until finally, a tiny flame flickered to life. Relief flooded through me as the warm glow illuminated the clearing. I knelt close to the fire, feeling its warmth against my skin. I pulled out a few items from my pack. I had managed to pack some dried fruits and nuts, but not much else. I would need to find food, but for tonight I allowed myself to enjoy this small victory. Watching the flames dance felt soothing, the crackling would a lullaby to my weary soul. A glance around reminded me I was still in the heart of the wilderness. My senses were heightened. Every rustle made me jump, but the fire felt like a barrier against the dark unknowns. I settled into the rhythm of the night, comforted by my growing makeshift home. Everything was quiet for a while, but eventually I heard it again, the sound of movement in the brush. My heart raced as I gripped my hatchet tightly. I rose, peering cautiously into the shadows that danced around the edges of my firelight. Then I spotted it, a raccoon, searching through the underbrush, its little hands raking through leaves. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. My tension eased a little. It was just a curious creature seeking its evening meal. But I found myself on high alert for the rest of the night. Each sound snapped me back to the wild. I was still lost, still vulnerable, and now heightened awareness stalked me as much as the shadows outside. Sleep arrived fitfully, full of dreams steeped in fear and wandering. I woke frequently to the sounds of rustling and the howl of wind moving through the trees. But as dawn broke, so did my anxiety. I emerged from my shelter, breathing in the crisp morning air. I had made it through the night. I felt as if the forest had welcomed me. My surroundings glistened with dew, and I knew I must move quickly. The day would be my chance to find food and gather more resources. As I headed to the stream again, I noticed a peculiar trail of small footprints leading away from the water's edge. Perhaps they were left by the raccoon or even something larger. My curiosity piqued, and I decided to follow. The excitement of the unknown seemed to empower me. This was my adventure now. I walked for a while, my heart racing with the thrill of exploration. The footprints led me into a glade, a stunning space filled with wildflowers and sunlight streaming down like a spotlight. It felt magical, and then suddenly the peace shattered. A loud rustling caught my attention, and I turned just in time to see the creature, a deer, startled and bolting away. But as it dashed, something glimmered in the undergrowth. I walked closer, my heart pounding. There, partially buried in the leaves, was an array of wild edibles, plump berries and greens just waiting to be picked. I couldn't believe my luck. Careful to pluck only what I needed, I gathered my bounty, excitement burning in my chest. Energized, I returned to my shelter, weaving the fresh greens into my collection of dried fruit and nuts. As I munched on the sweet berries, I realized I was learning to be self-sufficient. The wilderness was teaching me to pay attention, to observe and adapt. That night, as I sat by the fire, I gazed at my surroundings. The shelter felt like home now, a solid anchor in an uncertain world. The stars hung low in the sky like scattered diamonds, and for the first time I felt gratitude mingling with the wild. I closed my eyes, letting the sounds of the forest wash over me, releasing the remnants of fear. I had transformed my experience. I had built a life for myself. The wilderness was not an enemy, but a partner in my journey. Each sound, each shift in the dark felt like a part of the life I was embracing. Days turned into weeks, and the wild began to bloom around me. I had learned to forage with wisdom, to navigate the trails with ease, and to appreciate the beauty in solitude. I even began to notice the patterns, the calls of birds warning me of impending rain, the way the wind whispered through the leaves, sharing secrets of the forest. But still, there was a part of me longing for the familiar. I missed my friends, the laughter around a campfire, the ease of company. Each day as I returned to my shelter, I yearned for that connection while feeling the pull of the wilderness wrapping its arms around me. On a particularly clear day, I climbed up a nearby hill, my heart longing for a better view of the land. Sweat dripped down my brow as the terrain grew steeper, but the goal was worth every effort. When I finally reached the top, I paused, breathless. The view stretched infinitely, valleys rolling far into the distance, the sprawling trees below whispering wild promises. I felt a thrill. This was mine. I was no longer just lost, I was a part of something greater. Suddenly, a rustle caught my attention. I turned, surprised to see a fellow hiker standing at the foot of the hill, eyes wide with astonishment. At first, I felt a sting of anxiety had I intruded on someone else's path, but then the stranger called up to me. We exchanged stories excitedly. She had gotten lost too, but not as long as I had. We bonded over the challenges of being immersed in the wild, the rising fear of isolation, and the immense satisfaction of carving out lives in the wilderness. That evening, we decided to camp together under a blanket of stars, laughing over shared stories and creating a sense of camaraderie. Connection began to soften the edges of solitude I had felt for so long. In that moment, I realized how our experiences had intertwined, how survival had tangled our fates. I wasn't just surviving, I was now thriving in partnership with others. When morning broke, I stood outside my shelter, the dew glistening in the sunlight as we prepared to explore together. I had traversed the wilderness alone, and now I felt renewed, two souls walking forward among the trees, ready to embrace whatever came next. Through every challenge, I had grown. I was more than just a lost hiker. I had discovered courage, strength, and community. As I set off through the forest beside my new friend, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. I had found not only shelter, but a true connection to the wild, to myself, and to the people walking alongside me. The wilderness had become my teacher, and I stood ready to learn the next lesson, knowing that every step forward would continue to shape my journey in ways I had yet to fully understand. The shadows stretched as I stumbled through the dense underbrush, panic swirling in my gut. I hadn't meant to get lost. One moment I was enjoying a sunny afternoon hike with friends, the trees swaying gently in the breeze, and the next I had wandered off the beaten path, chasing after what I thought was a shortcut. Now the woods felt like a maze, and the familiar sounds of laughter were replaced by rustling leaves and distant echoes. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. The rustle from behind a cluster of bushes made my heart race. Was it an animal, or worse, something that was just as lost as I was? My mind played tricks on me, conjuring up images of wild creatures lurking just out of sight. I gripped the hatchet I had brought for protection, my only tool in this expansive, darkening wilderness. What had started as an adventure had quickly spiraled into desperation. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting elongated shadows that danced like phantoms around me. Fear clawed at me, but I couldn't let it take hold. I had to find a way out, and I knew I had to move. Relying on my instincts, I began to traverse deeper into the woods, each step muffled by the thick underbrush. I recalled watching survival shows where the experts always talked about finding shelter and water first. If I didn't find somewhere safe to spend the night, I could be in serious trouble. Hours passed, or maybe it was minutes. I didn't really know. A rush of anxiety filled my chest as I glanced around, seeking any signs of direction. I needed to calm myself to think clearly. Just then I heard the sound of running water. Hope surged through me, and I followed the sound, believing my instincts were my best guide at this point. As I moved deeper into the trees, the sound grew clearer, a soft babble guiding me forward. I finally broke through the dense foliage and stepped into a clearing. It was a beautiful sight, the stream glistening under the last remnants of sunlight, the water sparkling like diamonds. I knelt down, cupping my hands to drink, the cool water refreshing and revitalizing. As I sipped, a strange sense of peace washed over me. In this moment, I was reminded that nature had its way of both frightening and soothing us. I could hear the chirping of birds settling in for the night, a quiet reminder that I wasn't alone, but I couldn't linger. Night was falling quickly, and I had to find shelter. I scanned the area for potential spots, feeling the urgency rise again. That's when, from the corner of my eye, I spotted something uncommon, an enormous structure partially hidden among the trees. Curiosity pulled me closer. As I approached, the sight took my breath away. It was a massive bushcraft shelter built from logs and branches, an architectural marvel crafted right from the woods. Vines intertwined along the roof, creating a canopy of foliage above. It looked secure, inviting even, and I couldn't believe my luck. I stepped inside, disbelief washing over me. The interior was spacious, enough to accommodate a small gathering. A hearth sat in the center, filled with charred remnants of previous fires. I felt a rush of joy and gratitude. My heart raced. This was what I needed. Quickly, I set about making the place my own. I gathered dry leaves and added them to the floor for insulation, layering them thick to ward off the chill. As I worked, the shadows lengthened, the forest growing darker around me. The formality of wild nature began to creep back into my mind, reminding me I wasn't truly safe yet. But the urgent beats of anxiety, while present, began to fade. I felt a newfound determination as I reinforced the structure, placing larger branches crosswise to strengthen the walls. With every added piece, I felt more secure and comforted. This space became more than just a shelter, it was my fortress against the wildness outside. As I settled down beside the makeshift hearth, I struck my flint against a rock, sparks flying. Gradually, the fire caught, and a warm glow filled the interior of the shelter. The crackling flames provided a sense of safety. I melted into its warmth, envisioning a new life, a life where I could embrace adventure without losing myself. But as the fire flickered, so did my sense of tranquility. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still very much at the mercy of the unknown. The night deepened, and the forest transformed. Sounds echoed through the trees, distant howls, rustlings, and the occasional snap of a twig. I felt every part of my body tense up again. In the solitude of the night, images of wild animals crept into my mind. I thought about the stories I had heard of hikers going missing, of encounters that led to peril. But I remembered to breathe, to settle myself. I was not just a lost hiker, I was a survivor. As sleep began to take over, I wrestled with thoughts of home. I remembered the warm meals, laughter, and the comfort of familiarity. But such thinking felt weak. It was time to embrace this wild experience. I closed my eyes, soothed by the gentle crackle of my fire, letting the wilderness seep into my very being. When dawn broke, I awoke invigorated, the sunlight streaming into my temporary home. A sense of accomplishment flooded through me. I had survived the night. I crawled out of my shelter, stretching my arms and soaking up the sunlight. My surroundings felt different now, less like a threatening maze and more like a wild kingdom where I now belonged. My senses sharpened as I looked around. I needed to venture out, to be more than just a squatter in this beautiful space. Hot on the heels of that resolve came another need: food. I poked my head outside, ready to explore, and the first thing I saw was a rich array of greenery surrounding my shelter. The wild had abundance to offer, and I intended to take full advantage of it. As I wandered about, I spotted a cluster of wild berries, small and plump, nestled on a vine. I cautiously picked one and tasted its sweet starlight bursting on my tongue. I couldn't help but grin. Nature had blessed me. I gathered more berries, tucking them into my pocket, feeling like a forager on a grand adventure. But I knew I needed protein. I recalled the basic principles of hunting and foraging I'd learned through years of watching survival experts. I would need to create a small trap for small game. With each step further into the woods, I searched for inspiration. I found a fallen tree trunk that would serve as a sturdy anchor for a snare. My hands began to work instinctively, weaving a vine into a simple trap. My heart raced with excitement. It felt empowering to craft something intended to secure my survival. As twilight approached, I set the snare, quietly retreating to my shelter, heart pounding with anticipation. The fire crackled, and I cooked the berries over the flames. I savored my feast, feeling simultaneously thrilled and grateful for my newfound connection to nature. But that night, sleep did not come easily. I listened to the sounds of the woods. Every rustle of leaves took me deeper into a primal sense of awareness. I lay awake, my mind racing, questioning if my trap would work. Would I wake to a meal, or would the night sounds fill with something more sinister? Sleep finally claimed me, but it was restless. I tossed and turned, waking frequently to the chill in the air and the sounds of the forest. But when morning broke again, I crawled out of my shelter, blinking in disbelief. There it was, caught in my snare, a small rabbit. My heart raced with exhilaration as I approached it carefully. This was it, the sustenance I had worked for. Trembling with a mix of excitement and respect for the animal, I knew this would sustain me in the days to come. With determination, I prepared to clean the rabbit, feeling grateful for this chance. As I worked, I reflected on how far I had come, from a lost hiker overwhelmed by fear to a self-sufficient individual navigating the wild. Days turned into a week, and each moment felt like a step toward reclaiming control over my life. I repaired my shelter, learning how to harness materials from the forest. I developed a rhythm, appreciating the simplicity of survival amidst the complexity of nature. Every aspect of the wilderness became part of my existence, from the rustling of leaves to the way the sun set low, painting the skies in hues of gold and crimson. Yet, despite the thrill of self-sufficiency, a sense of longing lingered within me, longing for connection. I often pondered what my friends might be doing, whether they searched for me or simply continued their own lives as I ventured deeper into the wilderness solitude. Each lick of fire and each crackle reminded me of laughter shared in the warmth of company. One particularly clear day, a renewed sense of adventure coursed through me as I climbed up a nearby hill, my heart buoyed by what lay ahead. As I reached the summit, breathless, the view unfurled before me like a painter's canvas, a landscape painted with valleys and forests as far as the eye could see. But while I marveled at the view, a flicker of movement caught my eye down below. There it was, another hiker wandering at the foot of the hill, seemingly just as lost as I had been. My heart raced. I was not alone. I called, waving my arms to get their attention. The person looked up, their eyes widening in surprise. I felt a rush of excitement. It wasn't just my eyes that crossed the trails of the wild. As they climbed up to me, our eyes met and smiles erupted. They introduced themselves as Alex, and in moments we exchanged stories about the wilderness, our fears, our adventures. It felt like a reunion of sorts, two souls connected through the wild journey of survival. That night we built a fire together, sharing warmth and laughter as dusk settled around us. The sense of isolation that had held me captive for so long lifted in the presence of another. I realized how profound the experience had been. We were forging new connections, surviving together, and finding strength in our shared stories. As we ventured back toward my shelter the next day, I couldn't help but feel gratitude for everything that had led me here. My thoughts turned back to that moment when I felt panic swell deep within. Those fears transformed into moments of resilience in the face of uncertainty. In the days that followed, Alex and I took turns hunting, gathering, and fortifying our shelter together. Each task became a shared experience, deepening our bond. Instead of doing it all alone, I learned to appreciate the power of companionship and the harmony in working toward a common goal. We walked together, explored the hidden corners of the wilderness, and discovered even more wild edibles and adventurous trails. Meanwhile, I also began to realize how the wild had shaped me. I felt the shift within a different kind of strength, one forged in this raw environment. As we gathered against the backdrop of this beautiful landscape, I couldn't help but reflect on how being lost had brought me here, how it had led me to find companionship, and how it had taught me to lean into the uncertainties rather than shying away from them. Eventually, as the days turned into weeks, the bond between us deepened, the wilderness weaving new paths in our lives. We transformed what was once fear into confidence, stepping forward into the unknown with each other's strength beside us. When the day came for us to leave, a bittersweet feeling enveloped me. The shelter had once been a sanctuary for a lost soul, but now it felt like a bridge toward new adventures. As we packed our gear and prepared to venture back into the world beyond the trees, I turned back to look at the shelter one last time. Though I had come to it in solitude and fear, I was now leaving with a heart filled with gratitude and new memories etched forever in my spirit. The wilderness had not just taught me how to survive, it had shown me how to embrace the depths of connection, both with myself and with others. And as I stepped forward into whatever lay ahead, I knew that the spirit of the wild would continue to guide me, reminding me that even when lost, I would always find my way. The sharp snap of a twig echoed in the stillness, jolting me from a moment of thought. My heart raced as I peered into the deepening shadows of the forest. I had been wandering for hours, completely lost, and now every sound sent pangs of panic through me. Just a day ago, I was on a simple hiking trip, surrounded by friends and laughter. Now I was alone, with only the towering trees as witnesses to my growing fear. It started innocently enough, like all great misadventures do. I had seen a side trail that caught my eye while my friends joked behind me, and curiosity pulled me away. I thought I'd be right back, but the thrill of exploration quickly turned into disorientation. I'd wandered far from the path, and now, with the sinking sun casting long shadows of twilight, I felt the weight of my situation settling in. "Stay calm," I whispered to myself, gripping the hatchet I had with me. It was my only tool and my only line of defense. I had read enough survival articles online to remind myself of the basics. Focus on what you can control, finding shelter, food, and water. The cold air nipped at my skin as I took a step deeper into the forest, moving away from the stream I had found earlier. It trickled softly in the distance, a reminder of the comfort I had hoped to find. But I couldn't dwell on that now. I needed to forge ahead. The trees loomed around me, their gnarled roots stretching like arms, ready to ensnare the unwary. The sun dipped lower, and the world turned from vibrant greens to muted blacks and grays. My senses heightened with each rustle of leaves or distant animal call. I stumbled upon a small clearing, desperate for any sign of salvation. Then I saw it, a flash of brown and green. At first I thought it was a mirage, but as I drew closer, I couldn't believe my eyes. Before me stood a colossal bushcraft shelter, crafted with care and purpose. It was an incredible sight, walls built from sturdy fallen logs, the roof intricately woven with branches and vines. A wave of relief washed over me, almost making me stumble forward. This wasn't just a shelter, it was an oasis, a sanctuary nestled in the heart of nature. I approached cautiously, feeling both exhilaration and fear. Who had built this? Why was it here? I scanned the area for signs of other inhabitants, but saw none. Inside, the air was cooler, filled with the smell of damp wood and earth. It felt strangely comforting. The space was sizable enough to sit several people, and the foundation seemed solid. A small fire pit sat in the center, surrounded by a circle of stones that spoke of nights spent warming by the fire. I took a moment to bask in this unexpected gift. I wasn't just going to survive, I was going to thrive. I set my pack down, eager to make this place my own, but I forced myself to resist getting too comfortable right away. I had to reinforce the walls to ensure my safety. I could hear the distant sounds of the forest around me. Everything felt alive and threatening. Almost instinctively, I grabbed fallen branches and started to assemble a more secure barricade. The action soothed my nerves. With each log I added, I felt more in control. I hadn't just stumbled upon this place. I had reclaimed a part of my current fate. I pushed past my fear and got to work. As night began to close in, I felt both empowered and vulnerable. I lit a fire using flint and dry leaves, watching flames leap and crackle, their glow illuminating the walls of my now fortified shelter. I couldn't shake the sensation that I was still being watched, though, a nagging sense that the forest held secrets I was yet to uncover. That's when I heard it again, a rustling sound, closer this time. My heart raced and I grabbed my hatchet, preparing myself for whatever emerged from the shadows. Every moment felt like an eternity as I waited, adrenaline coursing through my veins. Then I saw it. A creature broke through the thick underbrush. I held my breath, ready for confrontation. It was a deer, not a threat, but a reminder that I was part of a world teeming with life. As it darted into the night, I let out a shaky breath. The forest was alive, and I was merely a temporary guest. As the warmth of the fire enveloped me, I began to reflect. I had faced the fear of being alone, of losing my way. This bushcraft shelter wasn't just a physical presence. It was a testament to my determination to survive. But with nightfall came an unsettling reality. The forest transformed, the shadows stretching and shifting in ways that left me feeling exposed. I sat closer to the fire, trying to stave off thoughts of what lurked in the dark. Each creak of wood made me jump, each rustle sending chills down my spine. I heard the distant hoots of an owl and the occasional snap of twigs, but those familiar woods I once felt comfortable exploring now seemed haunted, taunting me for my earlier arrogance. My mind raced to conjure images of creatures stalking me, bears, wolves, or something far more sinister. Eventually, exhaustion pulled me under. I drifted into sleep, but even then dreams were filled with shadows, echoing the very fears I was trying to escape. Morning arrived with a mixture of relief and dread. I crawled from my shelter, blinking against the bright light that flooded my space. I had made it through the night, but I was still lost, and the day stretched before me, unknown and daunting. I needed to explore, to find something that would lead me back to the familiar. I gathered what little food I had, some trail mix and berries I had foraged the day before. It wasn't enough to sustain me, and soon my stomach growled, reminding me I would need more substantial food. Finding a water source had been easy. I walked back to the stream, letting the cool water wash over my hands. As I knelt to drink, I felt invigorated by nature's simple gifts, but the thought of being alone gnawed at me. Continuing my search, I veered off the path of the stream, searching for signs of life or a way home. Just a few hours into my exploration, I spotted movement, small, quick. Holding my breath, I crouched low to the ground, heart racing, ready to spring into action. It was a rabbit nibbling on clover. I recalled the trap-making techniques I had studied but never actually tried. My stomach twisted with both hunger and excitement. If I could catch this rabbit, it would sustain me for days. With careful movements, I fashioned a simple snare using vines and a fallen stick. I felt alive with possibility as I anchored the trap to the ground. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but if I could catch even one animal today, I'd feel accomplished. After setting the trap, I retreated to a nearby thicket, hiding behind the dense foliage while keeping a watchful eye on my snare. The sounds of the forest blended around me, reassuring and comforting, but I couldn't let my guard down. Minutes felt like hours as I waited, and just as I was about to give up hope, I saw it, a flash of movement. The rabbit hopped into view, closely investigating the area. My heart pounded in my chest as I held my breath. It approached my trap, its delicate nose twitching as it sniffed the ground. Time slowed. My thoughts raced. Would it spring the trap? Would I have a meal? Suddenly, in one quick motion, it was caught. I leaped from my hiding spot, adrenaline surging through me. This was it. I approached carefully, my hands trembling with excitement and respect for the life I held in my grasp. I had done it. I had successfully captured my own food. Back at my shelter, I meticulously cleaned and prepared the rabbit, thankful for the sustenance. I could hardly contain my excitement as I cooked it over the fire, its aroma filling the air around me. A victory meal after days of uncertainty. My heart swelled with a sense of pride. I had transformed fear into motivation, vulnerability into strength. I leaned close to the flames, watching as the rabbit cooked, feeling that I had finally started to conquer this wilderness. Then as the sun began to set, painting the world in deep shades of orange and purple, I heard it again. A rustle from the thicket just outside my shelter. I froze, tension tightening my body. Had I just heard a growl? My heart raced as I reached for my hatchet, positioning myself defensively. Were those only mere animals, or was something more dangerous stalking me? The sound grew closer, and through the growing shadows, I caught a glimpse of movement, something big. Every instinct screamed at me to flee, but I couldn't do that. I had fought too hard to get here. Adrenaline coursed through my veins as I stood my ground. Suddenly, there was a break in the underbrush, and out stepped another person. I exclaimed, lowering my hatchet, my heart still hammering. The figure stared at me, equally surprised. They raised their hands in a gesture of peace. The tension faded quickly, relief flooding through me. What had begun as a terrifying moment transformed into astonishment. I wasn't alone after all. I asked, my mind racing with questions. Yes, I took a wrong turn and ended up here. Their voice was tinged with both anxiety and excitement. A moment of camaraderie sparked between us in that desolate wilderness. As we shared our experiences, I felt a sense of connection growing. Perhaps together we could navigate this challenge. But just as we began to bond, a low growl interrupted us, emanating from the dark foliage beyond. The personal connection quickly melted into fear as the growl rumbled again, closer this time. We exchanged glances, knowing we were plunged into something far more perilous. Shadows moved through the thicket, the sense of urgency pulling us from our newfound bond. They whispered, fear creeping in. I gripped my hatchet tighter, my mind racing with possibilities. It was time to find out. As I peered into the darkness, adrenaline flooded my system once more. We had a choice to make stand our ground or face whatever threat lay hidden in the depths of the forest. A moment of hesitation hung in the air as we stood at the precipice of uncertainty, ready to confront not just the wilderness, but whatever secrets it held together.